And hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Real with Rachel, where I'm Rachel Smith, a top producing RE/MAX realtor, head of the Smith Partners, located here in Mount Airy, and I am just over the moon. Not saying excited because I say that every show. Yeah. I'm over the moon to have our yearly recap with Dr. McMasters and James Schneider from Eagle Creek Mortgage. Yay! Yay. That's where they insert the edit of the yay! So guys, we are excited. We're going to be talking about the housing market with an economist and with a loan officer, giving it to you straight. What is the economy doing? What are the rates doing? How is that impacting us as consumers, realtor, mortgage lender, buyers, sellers, what's happening? So thank you guys so much for coming back.
Thanks, of course.
Hello.
Good to be back.
Well, let's get into it. I think last year, we nailed it with our predictions. Maybe we were a little behind. I don't know. I think we were pretty close into estimating that there was going to be somewhat of a slowdown. James, I'm going to go to you first. What are you thinking?
I think we're like 90, we were talking about before, I think we're like 90% correct, 90%. Give or take. Give or take, pardon me. Yeah,
so 90%.
We've seen rates go up. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they've gone up more dramatically than I think anyone expected. I thought 5 was going to be the high point. Now you're probably looking at like low 5s for someone putting 20% down with good credit, etc. Depends on flexibility with who you work with, whatever. But I think it's definitely kicked out a lot of clients that weren't expected to be kicked out.
Correct.
Unfortunately.
Correct. And then also cut their buying power and eligibility, which in turn has an effect on sellers. But let's talk about these rate hikes real quick, because I know that the Fed had announced in the beginning of the year that these were going to be happening. And Dr. McMasters, I think we had spoke about it being a 4 or 5 total, and we've seen 2. Have we seen 2 hikes, 2 Fed rate hikes thus far? And now we are currently in the 5% bracket. I have seen some 4.99s, maybe some 4 3/4 with buying down the rate. But we are now in the solid 5s for interest rates. Now, do we foresee that that's going to go up? I know before starting to film here, we had a little bit of whatever. So I'm going to ask you, do you think that the rates are going to go up? And then I'm going to direct back to you.
I would still assume for the time being. And first and foremost, I still tell people, if you're buying a house now, this is a temporary mortgage. This is not your forever mortgage. The average time that someone holds a mortgage is like 6 years. So I would assume, let's just say worst case scenario, let's say low to mid 5s. But that being said, this is where you can get creative. You look at adjustable rate mortgages, 7 and 10 1-arms, 5 1-arms, whatever it may be, to make sure that payment, because I think in maybe a year, 6 months to a year, we'll be in a recession, and that's normally when we see rates start dropping. At that point.
And that will give
and that's on average.
And that's on average. And when you start to talk recession, because I know we're going to get into this, with the rates changing, that puts us into a real estate market that would be somewhat similar to like what we saw in 2011, 2012, with those 2 3/4 rates. Do I think that they're going to come down that low ever again?
I would say upper 3s though. I mean, if you can sit there, prices they're going to keep going up. That's habitual. This is a real market. Supply and demand. This is a real market. But I do think with rates going down, I wouldn't be afraid to say low 4s, upper 3s, which are still really,
I feel good about that. And we are seeing rates like that now currently, however, utilizing an ARM product, which has a little bit more risk associated with it versus being that 30-year fixed.
Right.
So I have seen that where a lot of lenders are now starting to assimilate and adapt to the market.
Right.
Okay, guys, 5.5 may not be your jam. We can get you a lower rate, but it's going to entail utilizing a different loan product, which has different risks associated. So ARMs, 7 years, balloons, 5-year ARM, balloons, but you get that lower rate. Can you sell or refi between that time? Absolutely.
And that's normal, and that's also, they won't be ballooning. Now they have a lot of restrictions compared to like 15 years ago. It can only go only so high. 15 years ago, it could go from 2-3% to 15 to 16%. That can't happen anymore.
So there's caps on
There are caps on all these to where it's usually like an extra 5%. But to be honest, at that point, I wouldn't even expect to be in that situation.
They've reacted to the issues that occurred between 2002 and 2008 and the housing crisis that we saw in 2007 into 2008. And so one of the concerns at that point was the use of the ARMs. And so as a result, they put the caps on.
Handy money out, just to get them qualified.
Right. And so now with the caps, you have less of there's still risk. There's still a different risk involved, but you have a different type of risk than maybe you would have had 15 years ago. So the person who bought 15 years ago and maybe lost their home because they had the ARM and then it went up.
Yeah,
from 2 to 15%.
Yeah, payment goes up to $3,000 in a month,
and then so you get that person who is now looking again and saying, "Oh no, I'm not going to do an ARM." You have to look at the different risks associated with it.
Correct.
Yes, there's different risk than the 30-year mortgage, but at the same time, it's not the same risk that maybe there was
prior to. It's a calculated risk, and it's a controlled risk.
Right.
Because not only is it a consumer taking that risk, but it's also the lending making that risk on the asset as well.
That's where the conversation becomes, what's the plan? You know, how long are you going to live here? Be here 2-3 years. Like I said, I expect everyone to be able to refinance within a year. I think we disagree on this a little bit.
That's great, but that will lead me in.
But that being said, if we can sit there, if you can get a rate that's going to work for you, and this is going to make your short-term budgeting
work for
situation
now, build that equity, do what you need to do to grow your wealth,
then you can,
and then modify accordingly.
Like I said, usually recession, besides 2008, 2009, more often than not, rates drop. And especially with the Fed funds raising the rates, that actually helps interest rates, mortgage rates, go down. So,
interesting concept, which I'm now going to throw to Dr. McMaster, because we did have a little bit difference of agreement, and I know we're going to get into a recession conversation. Sure. But what are your thoughts on the current rates right now?
Well, I mean, the Fed is raising the rates because, of course, right now, and the one thing within the 10% that we didn't get right, we didn't discuss the potential for inflation to happen.
Yeah.
So within that, we have seen the inflation, and the Fed is reacting to that inflation by raising the rates. The other thing, though, that they've talked about, which is why to some extent I am going to disagree with potentially them falling in a year, is the use of quantitative easing that they had been doing, that has some more impact on those longer term rates than the short term rate that is associated with the federal funds rate.
Right.
So within the quantitative easing, the other thing that I've heard, at least peripherally, and I haven't necessarily looked at all the detail as to what they've been saying on it, but that they've been talking about changing their holdings substantially over the next year. And so to some extent, as they change that, I think that will have an impact on the overall longer term / mortgage rates. Now, that might not impact the ARM rate, so maybe the ARM is still okay, but it might impact the 30-year rate differently than a 5, plus type of rate.
Right.
So
that's typically the product that's being utilized.
And that being said, they have a horrible budget right now, so they're trying to fix that. So they've stopped buying mortgage-backed securities essentially at this point. They used to buy $70 billion, I think, off the top of my head, and they were also going to start selling another $30 billion on top of that. So you're talking about $100 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, which is risen the prices up for mortgages. So I do see the worry in regards to rates possibly not going down. I'm just going off of previous statistics to where you see housing prices still go up and rates go down, except for the one blip in the radar, which was 2008, 2009.
Blip in the radar, we'll call it that. So with...
we'll
call it that.
It was a blap. It wasn't a blip. Yeah, it was a blap.
What you say?
Yeah.
So with that said, do we feel that there's going to be another increase? That's what I think Jerome had said, right? Good old pal had said, hey, we're expecting a few more little bumpity bumps. Do we anticipate that to actually happen this year, and by what degree?
Well, the other fact that came out, and I literally just saw this yesterday, was that GDP did slow down. So fourth quarter GDP from 2021 was up 6.8% growth, somewhere in there. I can't remember. Third and fourth quarter were both 5+% increase in GDP growth. the first quarter of this year, we saw a decrease of 1.4%. Now, that doesn't necessarily indicate that we've started into a recession yet, because they've changed the definition.
It's like there's a, oh, did I see that? Okay, we got to do this. Oh, there it comes that. Okay, now we have to do this. And I think there has been some acknowledgement of history lessons there from the past decade, 15 years. But I've seen that. Okay, here's this. And then we're also coming out of COVID. We're coming out of this pandemic that was not predicted in 2019. Well, maybe it wasn't. We weren't predicting it. But we're also coming out of that and trying to adjust on that from an economic standpoint as well.
And so with the Fed reacting to inflation, as GDP growth slows, they want to react to the inflation, but they don't want to overreact. So it may have an impact. They're actually meeting this week to be able to say, do we not do the rate hike since we just saw the decrease in GDP growth? Or do we go ahead and do the rate hike because inflation did get beyond what we really wanted it to get to? They had, over the past 2 years now, they've changed a little bit how they're reacting to, or when they're starting to react to inflation. And so as a result, it got a little further along than maybe they anticipated.
Not trying to rein it back in here.
Rein it back in, but how slowly or how quickly do we need to rein it back in?
And I think so. We saw rates jump up that quickly.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was supposed to be a slow, gradual,
and it was a shock,
and that's okay.
And consumers and buyers. Now, remember, this is something else. We're seeing it in the streets, real deal, real time, right? Because we're involved in it. We're in the industry. You're in your industry. But consumers who are seeing things on social media, on newscasts, on articles, on documents, on reports, tends to be delayed and has to have a trickle-down effect and be repetitively displayed for them to catch on, and you see that delay as to a response as to what's happening.
But I also think one thing is not even being really pointed out is unemployment's going to probably spike a little bit here, because when you start thinking about it, I mean, I was telling my friend, it was like, it used to be try to make $1 out of 15 cents. Now I just want 15 cents out of my dollar. So when you sit there and go buy gas and all of a sudden it's an extra $20, $30, you know what happens? You start cutting out some of the extra stuff that you used to sit there and pay for.
We're not going to the movies.
We're not going to the movies.
Hey,
we're not going to the restaurants. We're not going to do this. And you know what happens? And all of a sudden they can't afford to just pay, especially with increases in salaries or wages, whatever it may be. So I think that we could see, unfortunately, an unemployment spike to go with what, like I said, a recession, which will
also though slow down the inflation.
Right.
So it is always that push and pull that says as inflation goes up, well, we've got back down to unemployment levels from an official numbers perspective that are the same as 2019.
Yeah.
So as a result, we've got the inflation, which we didn't have in 2019, but we have the unemployment that's back down, which was putting some of the pressure on prices and everything else. When there's supply chain issues that are causing issues within
it's like
prices and inflation. But
you think of it as a pot, a stew. And I think you've got different cooks in the kitchen, dash in a little bit of this, a little bit of that. How's that stew going to turn out? I think that's the real question, which is going to be, what's our prediction for next year? Now, you think that we're going to be heading into recession, something similar. I've had other mortgage professionals mention that type of, and other industry professionals as well. But let's take it back to the Economist and get your insight on, do we foresee a recession, or do you think that we're going to have a little bit dash into the pot that's going to avoid that stew?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily know that you can ever avoid a recession because they're just part of the natural cycle of things. So the question is how long? And to be able to say a year, given where inflation is at, I could easily see that it will happen sooner rather than later. Simultaneously, if we bring it back even into the mortgages and the higher rates at 5%, that's slowing that industry down, which will also slow the new construction down, because then less people are buying new construction, which is where we do really see those starts of recessions many
when
times.
It hits the construction industry.
Historically, when that industry goes down, then everything else kind of slows down.
Not to mention the perfect storm of the lumber prices influxing.
Right.
Now we have seen that teetered
I
off,
see
Mary
it.
Builder.
It is.
So we're
It's
going to
hard.
watch that and see what happens. However, you're right. I mean, that is typically the first indication in the real estate industry as
Right.
to something.
Something else.
But I got to tell you guys, I'm seeing it in the streets, supply and demand in every single market. There is a consistent demand for housing right now outside of the DC, Baltimore metro area. More and more people, our
Right.
millennials are growing up and buying houses. Our baby boomers are deciding they want to retire and do other things. We've got the people and they're ready to go and they're serious buyers. Now they want something for it. And I think a lot of other buyers are seeing, we don't want to get into a bidding war. You know, we'll wait and we'll see if things cool off. And I think
Right.
we're starting to see
We're
a little bit of a
starting
plateau.
It's starting to go. It used to be here, and now it's starting to come down from how many people they're bidding against. And I think with the increase in rates, once again, with all due respect to everyone, I think this is actually a good thing to have because you know what it is?
Levels the playing
It is, yeah, exactly. Levels the playing field. It's people that are financially a lot more stable.
Yes.
You know, and I hate to say it like that, but you know, what happens is
associated,
right,
not maxed out.
yeah, you're maxed out. Cool. You know what? You're gonna have your turn. Everyone has their turn. You can figure out ways to figure out and do this and all that stuff. But I think it's gonna actually help the economy overall in regards to the housing market because now it's sufficient buyers, and this is more like it was 4 or 5 years ago when it was.
And we're also
people-
not getting
people
the
on in.
people who are having to have the immediate reaction to COVID and the pandemic.
Love that word.
That basically said, I need more room in my house because I have to now work from home.
Right.
And so that is stabilizing, and people are figuring out if I'm working from home 2 days a week or 4 days a week or never going back into the office again, and I need that extra room in my house versus the person who is looking at it from the other economic side of things where maybe they are the millennial that's finally at a point where, okay, I'm to the point. Because they're buying houses a little later for various reasons. So
Right.
they're aging up to that point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to buy my house. And then we do have the baby boomers who are looking to switch out. They're getting out of the house that they had when the kids were there.
Yep.
And so, but we had a lot of reaction, I think, over the past 2
Reaction,
years.
reaction. And I love that you're saying that because some key words here. Reaction, spike, overvalued, bubble, relief, jump, demand. These are all key words that are incorporated into headlines that these consumers are seeing.
Right.
So when you're consistently seeing headlines like that, what the heck are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Do you jump in and buy? Oh my gosh, I have to hurry up and do it now. Or are you the other consumer that has the mentality of pump the brakes, let's
Right.
watch and see what happens. And I think we're seeing almost a perfect storm of something like that now.
We're seeing the people who pump the brakes.
Yeah.
You're,
exactly.
You're seeing.
I
I'm
am,
not.
but then
You're
I've got
saying-
the other people that are saying, that's gonna keep going up, let's buy now before we're at the 6s and the 7s. So it's a mix, but then again, nobody has that crystal ball.
Right.
Do we think we're gonna get in the 6s and 7s next year?
I don't think so.
If we kept on this trend?
But-
or do you think the 5s is gonna stick around for a while?
I think we're going to hopefully stay in the 5s. Worst case, upper 5s.
Okay.
But I still am in the belief once we hit a recession. But I will admit, with what you said, I remember being here last year, and we're talking about lumber prices. Jeremy's out there building something, and here we are. We're all talking about.
I think he was.
Yeah,
was
he was.
here?
Yeah,
He was actually building
yeah,
something?
He was
and
building-
Oh
yeah,
my
and we were
gosh.
all sitting here talking about lumber prices causing a new home build issue, and it was, hey, now I'm at home. I need, I don't know, a new shed in the back to where I can just hide by myself, and that's what caused a major issue last year. Now that's not such the case because people are starting to go back to work and all that stuff. So those
are
lumber
starting to go
prices
back to
start
work.
coming down, and
then a lot of people were doing the refis or cash out
Yeah.
or HELOC to take advantage of that equity that
Exactly.
the market
And then they
held.
cou- then they
and
couldn't-
then they're constructing or adding on to their house, improving the value.
Exactly.
But the question is whatever was leveraged from the equity,
right.
is that going to put them in a scenario where they're now, I mean, obviously it's a 80% loan to value with that 20%
Exactly.
cushion, but I'm starting to process, okay, people are taking out, for buying their equity and the home values are here, but what happens if they start, are we going to see another underwater type of situation?
But it's also how they play it. So you can always increase your value. In the end, worst case scenario, you sell the house. Don't want you to sell your house. We want you to make sure you're happy and you build all this stuff up. But that being said, a lot of people we're still a heavy consumer debt country, unfortunately. A lot of credit cards.
Sorry.
Yeah, so luckily, rates are still low enough to where you can sit there and cash out, knock out a lot of credit card debt, especially with all the equity in the home. I've been able to help 2 people over the past month. They knocked out over $60,000 worth of credit card debt.
Yeah, because you can consolidate debt, take advantage and put all your debt into one kit and caboodle and leverage it on your house.
Is it 3%? No, but I'll tell you this: 5.5% sounds a lot better than 19%. Yeah, and especially
that's what you're paying on your credit card.
Yeah.
In fact, I had this conversation with one of my clients yesterday. Hey, you got a $10,000 credit card at 22%, or hey, you've got $60,000 equity that you can tap. Still safe, still have a little bit of buffer in case you need to sell or do something in the long run. Why don't you take that? You're paying 5% on that same $10,000.
As long as you don't have the person who then has my credit card is empty, and they rerun it up. So you always have to be aware of the...
Cut the card, don't close the account.
Yeah, exactly.
Put it in the cup of water in the freezer.
Right.
Yes.
And back out when you really need it. But in the meantime, you just have to make sure that balance, that you're not just using the equity in your home to...
Because we do have the American conditioning mindset of let's go. I want one, spend.
Oh, shit,
and then you're leveraging it on your biggest asset.
Yeah. Oh, shit, I'm on Facebook. Oh, cool. That looks like a great looking shirt. I might just buy that.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
the struggle is real to not keep clicking in. Oh, what? Wait, what? That purse? Those shoes? That's a cute. Yes, it's not fun.
I'm not that level yet, but I'm just a shirt. I'm not shirt. Not purse and shoes.
Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, let me read some headlines and get your reaction off of it. We're in a historically overvalued housing market, and the cities could see a housing market. Forecast features high prices and interest rates. Pandemic housing market creates extraordinary wealth. Housing market prices rise. Worsen inflation dilemma. Is the U.S. housing market heading for a price correction? Home buyers rushed in as mortgage rates rose, boosting housing prices. These are all articles that are contributing to what consumers are reading and reacting on emotion. Do you feel that having emotions and reactions to headlines in news and media plays a big part in how people react and how the economy is impacted?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime we have, and we have a certain amount. I mean, consumption is 70%, and consumption does not include the housing market, at least the new construction housing market. But consumption is 70% of the U.S. GDP. When we measure it. And so somewhere between 65 and 70% on any given year. And new housing is separate. New housing is included in a category called investment, which is what businesses are normally buying. But because it's lasting for years, it's included in that category. So whenever you have consumer confidence fall or consumer confidence be a little bit impacted, you're going to see GDP and the measures of the economy changing.
You're going to see a reaction.
Right, you're going to see that reaction. Good, bad, or indifferent, you're going to see that reaction. And so sometimes it's going to be a good thing that, we've got a little bit of incentive to go ahead and keep the market going by having housing prices are going up. If it's going up a little bit, and that's why a little bit of inflation is a good thing, it convinces us to help the economy keep going. But a lot, we start to worry and we start to pull back, and then we get those bumps and spikes, and everything is a little bit wonky. And so a little bit of increase, we're good, and we get the right people reacting. A lot of increase, and all of a sudden we have the panic and the fear, and it's never good when you're reacting to fear.
No.
Whether it be personal or economic, it's not good.
No.
Trust me, my parents will tell you that. Reaction on emotion. I'm their number one kid for that. But no, and then that leads me into, we're watching these news channels. We're watching the news channels, and we're taking into consideration everything that's happening overseas. Example, Ukraine. Do you feel that what's happening overseas in Europe, China, and everything else is having an impact not only on our economy, which I do feel it is, but in the housing market? Do you see that anything overseas affecting the housing market industry?
I haven't necessarily focused on whether or not it would be impacting the housing market, but it's definitely impacting the economy, and not necessarily because we bought a lot of oil from Russia. We did get a certain amount of, but it's where everyone else is getting their products from.
Right.
So a lot of European oil was got from Russia and the Ukraine. And as a result, they're not getting it from there. So now they're buying it from our sources, which is part of why we see between, 450 and
my
5
gosh.
gallons of gas. And so we see some of those impacts. From there, obviously the housing market's going to be impacted. Every market's impacted when oil and gas
Yep.
go up. So in that regard, it may very well also be looking at, as more people are going back to the office, how close do I need to live to work?
Yep.
Or what kind of car do I need, etc. Because then you bring in the other aspects, which will happen not in the next year, but over the next 15 to 25 years, as we see more and more environmentally friendly options in terms of not using fossil fuels, and then they have some other issues in terms of environment with regard to with regard to
we'd be here all day for that.
etc.
Yeah.
But as a result, we see some of that. I think our bigger challenge in the housing market started before that with the tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Interesting.
Because the tariffs on steel are impacting, even if it's only $100, you get that at least a steel beam in a small house. I don't know how many are in a large house, but you get the steel beam down the center, and
your I-beam.
You get your I-beam. Thank you.
Yeah.
But if the price of steel goes up, you're impacting that, and say it's only $100 at the I-beam level, well, that impacts every price.
Domino effect.
Yeah.
It's a domino
So-
effect. And then you start to try and think, like we've started to think, okay, well, if lumber's coming up, is concrete cheaper? Let's start doing concrete walls.
Right.
So again, adapting.
Right.
But it's just been interesting to watch the changes. And again, it's a little bit here and then a little bit here, a little bit here. And I don't think anybody can really tell what's going to happen or go because everyone's reacting. So it's interesting to see, but I think with the housing market, we're seeing a little bit of a plateau now.
We are.
More inventory's coming because those sellers want to ride the wave, which it's still, I would consider a seller's market, but we are seeing a little bit of a shift, whereas more inventory comes on as the rates go up, the demand, or the pool of buyers that once qualified more are now cut.
I think
So you're seeing that
the
push-pull.
idea is you can't expect, you might be able to, but you can't expect the 10, 15, 20% over asking price like we could 3 months ago.
Yeah, no, it's changed.
there has to be a realistic
What goes up must come
expectation.
down.
Yeah.
The market's coming to an equilibrium because
Exactly.
demand is changing because of, to some extent, quantity demanded is changing because of the price change.
Right.
Just, and even though the mortgage rate is separate, when as a consumer, I look at the whole price. I'm looking at it going, okay, if I pay $375 but I'm paying 5%, then I got to figure that as opposed to being able to pay $400 at 2 or 3%,
Right.
whatever the numbers come out to be. But in the grand scheme of things, we're seeing both the price that the sellers are able to get and the price that the buyers are willing to buy kind of come together more at that.
Come to a meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And I like it. I like it for both. I feel like the sellers are still getting what they want. They're getting a strong value for their home. And I think it's also affording the opportunity for buyers to come in and, again, not pay 20% over.
Right.
Throw in some contingencies, even the playing field a bit.
In the end, if you think about it, let's just say somebody bought a house 3 years ago. Or 2 years ago, here, let's just say May, right? So you can still walk away with almost a 15% profit off of a sale. And you don't have, at this
because
point.
I calculated yours at 22% since the last time.
Oh,
22% increase.
Well, I calculated 24.
20.
No, just kidding.
But I'm just one of your realtors.
But to be honest, at this point, you're still going to walk away with if you are looking to sell, which you don't have to. Everyone's situation is different, et cetera. But we still expect, on average, especially in this area, and we said it last year, this area is recession-proof. Mm-hmm. We have government workers, people that still make well into six figures, etc. We are actually in the lucky area of being recession-proof.
We're going to be the next East Coast California.
That's a push, but we'll see. But either way, if you still expect let's say 3 to 7% increase in prices, that's normal. Like that's a real sales value,
that's
and this
normal.
is
I
a
don't think
normal
we've seen
market.
that though in a while, have we?
Yeah, because we were at like 12, 20, 15, 22%.
So for example, Fredrick County, 387 are the units that have sold thus far from March. These are March statistics, guys. Let me just run down this real quick. 387 properties closed, units sold in March, 427 in 2021. That's a 9.4% decrease. The average sales price in March of 2022 as opposed to March of 2021, 467,999, 420. 467 to 420. It was 420. Then the median sales price is 444. It was 410 in 2021. That's an 8.3% increase in prior to 11.3. The units pending in March went from 460. And then comparing it to 2021, 578. The active inventory, 244, where in March of 2021, we had 394. Months of inventory is 0.5, whereas in March of 2021, it was 0.8. Guess what our median days on market are for both years?
18.
5 and 5. That has stayed the same. 5 days is the average DOM, days on market. And then new listings, so new product coming onto the market, 598 in March of 2021, and now we're at 578, so we've lost 20 houses. So we're seeing a rise in prices, and we're seeing a drop in the merchandise, in the inventory. So what's going to happen? Are we going to see an influx more now? Or, that's, I think, what we're trying to gauge. Are we going to see more inventory coming on? Or do we think it's going to be stagnant? And that's kind of what I think we're all trying to figure out. Is there going to be more product to sell, or are we going to be sitting like this for forever? Now, I'm seeing more in coming soon status coming on more and more. So my prediction is that we are going to have more inventory, that it is going to continue to level out the playing field, and that this will be still a good opportune time for buyers to purchase real estate, be safe with their values, and still take advantage of historically low interest rates. It's not 18% like in the 80s, and I think we touched on that last time, right? Everybody's like 5, and I'm still like, hey, that's pretty decent. You're paying 20 on your credit card, so let's figure it out. So I think it's still a good time also for sellers to leverage and take advantage of the market. Now we also have all these appraisals from these high values that we're going to be comping out and utilizing, but then you've also have a decreased buyer pool. Those buyers that qualified for your house last month, half of them aren't going to qualify anymore. Maybe not half, but a quarter of them aren't going to qualify anymore because of the rate hikes. So their debt to loan value, or their debt to income ratios, have changed. So they no longer qualify for that $500,000 property. They're only qualifying for $450,000, for $475,000. So hey, seller, those 10 buyers that you had are now cut down to 7. So those 7 buyers that are now interested are going to be more scrupulous, and you may not have those multiple offers, and then that's when you start to see a shift.
And the one thing that people don't really kind of factor in is, at this point, coming up tax assessments. You know what happens? Everyone's property has gone up. You know what happens? Monthly taxes.
Mine hasn't. My value went down, government. My value went down, tax assessor.
But overall, you have to expect taxes to start to go up with the upper prices, which also kind of, with the higher interest rates, starts pushing people a little bit even lower than they were even expecting. Because obviously that is part of our calculation to get them, make sure that they stay in their budget. That's first and foremost. But also make sure that they're qualified and pre-approved.
Now, do you think we're going to see an influx in inventory? Yes or no?
At this point, I would say it has to. I don't see any other
Do you think we're going to see
answer.
an influx in inventory?
Yes, and for various reasons, because not just the changes in housing prices, interest rates, tax rates, etc., but there's any number of reasons why 2 years ago it wasn't the right time, and the locations of where people are going are changing. Because 2 years ago when you think, oh, I'm going to be working from home forever, and then all of a sudden your boss says no, and so
now we're seeing that.
So
now they want people
coming on too
back in 2 days a week or 3 days a week.
Right.
So I think we're going to see changes in inventory, both people wanting to be closer to work, and then people
I love it.
leaving and
love it
wanting
all.
to be further away.
I love the mystery.
and also-
I love the surprise. I love the entanglement. I love it all. I love it.
I also think people just want to get out. Like, you know, like,
my clients are
you
like,
know, like,
Florida.
I spent like
Got
a year
one
and a
coming
half-
right now. They're
I
like,
was
Florida.
actually, I mean, so this is not local.
No,
but
just
I was
even going to
visiting.
work.
I was visiting the Wilmington, North Carolina area over the summer, and actually, I guess it was over Christmas, and was talking to a person that was in a housing development down there, and they were saying how they have seen a large number of people come out of the large cities, Charlotte, Raleigh, etc., and be moving down that way because their bosses are no longer saying, you know,
Yep.
we need you.
So
Yeah.
we'll go sit
But-
down at the beach,
Right.
or we'll sit down at the
Right.
lake. I've got a majority of clients
Right.
that are doing that. And then I've got my clients that have been townhouses, smaller HOAs, and they're like, yeah, we want 10 acres.
Yeah.
We want to be on our own. We can work from home. We can go in a day or two. So it's a mix of different consumers wanting different things. And
Right.
it's family specific, client, customer specific as to what their needs are. And it's great. It's fascinating to me. I think it's, I'm hoping that things will even out a little bit and not be so tense for both parties, because it's, you know, sellers get all these multiple offers. That's overwhelming too. And then you get these buyers that back out once they win, and they win the shiny prize, and you're in the middle of escrow. So
Right.
it's some control of the market would be
Exactly,
good.
and this is where I think the market is strongest. You know, like, cool. This is low rates, great. You know,
Still low, yeah, I'm
but
loving
still not fun. You know, like sometimes people get very emotional in regards to when you put in 15 to 20 offers. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
And those that are financially stable in this market, now you can actually, you know, you're going to have competition. Not as much, but now it's a lot more realistic market. Like I said, about 1,000 tops already. For, you know, like this feels more right than the way
I think
it's
we're
been for the past
like
year or
a
two.
2019, because 2019, I think everybody says, oh, pandemic caused these house prices. 2019, we were even seeing some elevated levels and some going over ask
Exactly.
and some things of that nature. So I'm excited to see what happens over the next year. I say we do another year cap. So all in all, we think there's going to be an influx. We think the rates are probably going to stay in the 5s and 6s. We feel a recession on the rise if certain measures aren't taken into account. And if that recession does occur, it would be timing-wise potentially a year or so out. You think we might see something
I'd
fall,
give it,
winter?
Yeah, well, fall, like not this fall. But I would go towards, and we may be heading towards it by next spring.
Okay.
But it you know, depending on how people react, it could happen a whole lot sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by 12 to 24 months.
12 to 24 months, and
Yeah.
I think that's typically our predictions usually, and that's where we're at here. I think I was premature by saying things would slow down last year, but I'm seeing it now, and
Yeah.
I'm seeing a delayed spring market as well, because typical Maryland spring market starts in February, and we're just getting some stuff going here in the
And-
beginning of May.
And of course, it matters on family situation and stuff like that. If you, couples with no kids, go out and buy a house now. Like, now's your chance. now's your chance to
What?
jump in.
Go travel the world, enjoy each other. What are you
Actually,
talking
don't
about?
buy a house. Yeah. And don't have kids. But I digress.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I mean, this is the peak time for couples, because you're right, it is a delayed spring market. I think we'll probably see later May, early June, where a lot more families kind of jump on in. So if you are a young couple looking to buy a house, this is actually probably the perfect time for you to jump in.
This is the perfect time to sell and shop.
Yeah.
Sell high, buy low.
Exactly.
Sell and look around and shop.
Yeah.
Assuming you have someplace to live in the short term.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Or
I
it's
already tapped my one time with my parents, so we're stuck here. We tried to pull that off again.
Yeah.
You want all your kids? No, you're done.
So.
But, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on for our yearly recap yet again.
Yep.
Let's do it again in a year and see where we're at. I mean,
Cool.
heck, we could even do a whole 6-month thing. We're going to link some information down below. If anybody has questions, we will get that off to the appropriate parties. Dr. McMaster, thank you so much for coming on. And James,
Yes,
we will
thank
see you
you.
again soon.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.